It's all right. You've got a better voice than me. You want to take over? Would you like to hear a little bit about the rose garden and how it started and the issues with water?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, I'll give you a brief run through. When we bought this property 6 years ago, it was using 171 megalitres of water. Now, it was flood irrigated, so it looked like an Olympic swimming pool at the end of each irrigation. Within 6 months of us buying the property, we were told we had to cut our water back by 30%, and there's no excuses, which really threw us into a bit of a panic, because when you've got a old established system like we've got here, it was very hard to try and work out how we were going to get around that issue of not using water. So what we did, we immediately started investing again in drip irrigation technology. We put the whole property under drip, and we did that over 18 months. We've spent about $250,000 just putting in infrastructure to help us cope with the fact we've got less water. Not the fact that we've got a licence of 100 megalitres, but as I said, the place was using 171 megalitres. Today, we're using 60, 65 megalitres. We're getting better production, better plant health, and slowly getting the place around to be a lot easier to manage. You might say, well, how? When you stop flood irrigating, you stop rotary hoeing and cultivating. That's the way you used to get rid of the weeds. The minute you put drip irrigation, you're confining all your watering to an area just around the bushes. So that means you can't go out and cultivate it. So we had to then look at some way of controlling the weeds with herbicides. For those of you who are avid rose growers would know that you cannot use Roundup around roses. It's highly allergic to, roses are highly allergic to glyphosate. The fact that we have a cut flower business as well as a petal business, we sell the petals for weddings and funerals and things like that, but we also sell up to 400,000 buds. And that's because we've got about just over 4,000 varieties of roses on the place. If you want to sell buds into nurseries for them to bud onto Woodstock, you've got to certify you don't have glyphosate on the property, because deformities carry through on the buds. So that they could bud up 200,000 bushes, and the next thing they know they've got 200,000 bushes with deformities in them, and they don't get very happy about things like that. What we had to do once we went to drip, because some of these bushes are here 40, 50, 60 years old, we weren't sure how they were going to respond for a start. So that was a bit of a punt, but luckily once we learnt that you had to put on a little bit of water a lot of times rather than a big irrigation, we started to get in front, and the bushes responded, their health was better. With flood irrigation, the place was either too wet, too dry, or just right in the middle. Our pickers used to go out with rubber boots to pick the roses half the time, and the other time there'd be dust out there from the cultivating and the rotary hoeing. We have fully computerised water monitoring, soil moisture monitoring, and that's all now driven. The whole irrigation system is based on computer. We put all our fertiliser on with the irrigation. So instead of putting on 1 or 2 applications of fertiliser a year, we might put on 1 a week during the growing season, when we might water 2 or 3, 4 times a week. Now you say, well, that's a lot of water. Well, the fact is we're using 65% of our allocation and 1/3 of what the property was using when we came. Without doing that, we wouldn't be standing here today. The other part about this business is that when Anne and I bought it, we used to get a few tourists come through, and there was a gold coin donation in a tin, and they'd go for a walk and then go home. We decided to put this building up. We needed a better work area, because the work used to be down in a tin shed under those trees over there that you can see over my right shoulder. And hot days, the sprinklers were running on the roof to keep all the workers cool. And it was just really not a work environment that was conducive, 1, to good health, and 2, productivity. We put this building up. I've been collecting cars since I was 14, and Anne said, why don't you put a few of your cars there? We soon figured out that women were the main people that were coming to visit the garden, and the blokes were tending to stay out in the car park. I'll tell you a funny story about that in a minute. So once we started putting cars in, tourist numbers started going through the roof. We've just expanded, we've just spent another $100 million on the noisy building you can hear behind me, because we were getting more and more events like you people coming and wanting the space. And for us, unless you had a good experience when you came here, we actually didn't have a business. So we tried very hard to work on giving our visitors a good experience. I can tell you that this financial year, our tourist business will exceed all the income from the Rose Garden. So that gives you some idea of how adversity can force you to do things that you normally wouldn't do. And for us, it's been the lifesaver. No, 500,000. Yeah, 500,000. Yeah. And the builders, we kicked them out at 8 o'clock this morning. So just watch the paint, all right? Now the cars, because you're all Chrysler people, I thought I'd start off with a treat for you. Those of you who have seen the little silver Lotus over on the right-hand side there, that's the first Lotus that ever came to Australia. It came in 1955. And those of you who have read the plaque on it will see that a young Doug Chivers, who's raced Valiants, that most of you would be well aware of, that was the first car that he raced in. How he came to race in that car, he actually didn't own it, well he sort of owned it, but the guy, Graham Strawn, who brought the car into Australia, about 18 months after he brought it in, some of you will remember the Round Australia Radix trials, and there was a trial that CAMS wouldn't sanction, so they said that any CAMS licence holder that raced in that race would have their licence taken away, and a few of the guys, including Strawn, told him to go and get nicked, and went in it, lost his CAMS licence, so he loaned the car to Doug for a couple of years while he paid his penance for going in that car trial. Doug did very well in that car. It just about cleaned up everything that went in for about 2 years. I've got some classic shots of it coming through the cutting sideways at Bathurst. It's a great little car to drive. When it arrived here, it arrived without an engine and gearbox, much to Strawn's dismay, because he wanted to go racing straight away. So he got onto Colin Chapman and said, "Where's the engine and gearbox?" And Chapman said to him, "But you didn't say you wanted an engine and gearbox." Anyone who knows Colin Chapman's story will know why that sort of resonates. So they had a fair bit of a brawl over that, and because Strawn said cars in Australia all have engine and gearboxes. So Chapman said, "Well, why don't you be a good chap? You go and find an engine and gearbox somewhere in Australia, and I will appoint you the Australian agent for Lotus." So that's how they settled their argument. Strawn went on and imported several cars, and the story of Lotus in Australia went from there. So that's an interesting car. Raced all its life. It's got a Coventry Climax 1100cc motor and an MG gearbox. It's a fun car to drive. It gets up. But when you're flat out, you know you're flat out because everything moves around you. It's a bit like sitting on the back of an eagle flying. Everything flaps. The little yellow Zeta belongs to a local guy. It's a very original car, that sports. Yesterday day before we had two guys from Cairns on their way back to Cairns with another Zeta, which on the trailer, which was chassis number 001. This is chassis number 008. The other one differed from this. It was a prototype car. It had doors. Apparently it raced at Collingrove, but the guy that sold it to this guy from Queensland had owned it for the last 25 years. It sat in back of a bus down in a depot. The blue Lotus 11, which is next to it, that car was brought in by John Layton. You've all heard of Layton Constructions. When old man Layton came out to Australia in 1958 to set up the business, he was worried about his teenage son getting into trouble in England when he left him there, so he bribed him he said, "I'll buy you a race car on the condition you've got to come and live in Australia." So that's how that car arrived. It originally had a Wilmot-headed Ford 10 engine in it, and in its day it was quite some car, and it blitzed everything. John Layton, John's not a bad driver. Some of you might know him as a Cooper S driver, but John raced for many, many years. He built that car, he and Graham Hill built two cars together in the Lotus factory, and they were side by side, and Everything Graham Hill did, John Layton copied as they were putting that car together in the factory. The red car, the Amel car, is my first car. It's the first one I ever had. I was 16 when I bought it, so I could register it, and I've had it ever since. It's a car that was bought out here by a guy called Robinson to take on the Austin 7s. It came out with an overhead valve conversion on it, which was highly unreliable. The car looked good in the pits, but once it got out on the track, it really let itself down a lot. So they end up going back to a pushrod engine. Jack McDonald Motors on Unley Road. Any of you remember McDonald Motors? Jack McDonald used that car. He bought it and used it to promote his new business as a motor repairer. And he raced in the Grand Prix in Victor Harbour in 1936. Hit a fence, managed to resurrect it and get back on the track. He actually finished the race, but I think he was about 30 laps down. The speed car, I don't know much about that. That comes from Bob Holland in Manham. There's a fair old story there. Bob's loaned us that car, and we're getting a few more speed cars here. I've been granted some extra space in this building, which I'm feeling very humble about. That's good for the boys. The T Ford in the corner there is a deceased estate. We're looking after it for the guy's widow. That car's an interesting car in as much that he always used to, when he'd go out and buy a wreck or a car, he'd always pull up in front of the house and go and get his wife and drag her out to have a look. Anyway, on this particular occasion, she relates the story that I heard him come in, she said, he didn't stop. I thought, oh, well, that's funny, you know. And then she said it started to worry me. She finally went out and what he'd done, the car was in such a bad state, he'd dragged it up behind his drying racks to hide it from her. And she just said, you know, he told him he'd lost his marbles completely. She's kept it because he worked so hard to restore that car to what it is. It's a lovely car. It's got a 2-speed axle, and she's kept that. And an Austin 7. He had a big collection of Ford bits, which all went to auction. MGTC behind you belongs to my father-in-law. I helped him sweep that car onto a trailer, and I say sweep it onto a trailer. It was from a deceased estate, and we were allowed to go through the house looking for anything that might be MG bits. They're under the bed, they're in the laundry, they're in the shed down the back. We had a trailer parked in the back lane, and we just kept putting anything that looked like MG on the back of a trailer. John Ruston, who's David Ruston's twin brother, restored that in 12 weeks. So that wasn't a bad effort.